This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by...
Now, some of you probably saw my video the other day about 2012 and the idea of making government institutions obsolete instead of fighting them. I'm still mulling over this concept and how it could be put into play, but we all know which government institution probably most deserves a spot on history's ash bin, at least in New Hampshire. It's the court system. So maybe it would be appropriate to import an obscure practice which began around 1950 in India. According to Western journalist Mark Shephard, a Gandhi supporter named Harivallabh Parikh started an institution known as the People's Courts. Now, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, but Harivallabh Parikh. Anyway, his story is just fascinating. I've thought about it here since I read about it around 2005. Basically, the court started as just this one man, Parikh. Sometimes he would hold court under a tree. Sometimes he would be at a spot that was an even distance between two complainants. And he would hear their cases, ranging from divorce to murder. He was successful at resolving disputes without the use of force. It was all about compensation, moral pressure, and reunifying the parties in conflict. Oftentimes the perpetrators would report themselves to the People's Court, so as to reduce the likelihood of a government prosecution. Over time, of course, the institution grew so that many people were involved in running it. Once the People's Court had resolved a case, it was difficult for the government to intervene. They couldn't get witnesses to testify or even show up. But even more compelling was the ability of the court to successfully punish abusive government officials, again without the use of force. Here's an excerpt from Shephard's book, Gandhi Today, which was, I think, published first in the mid-'80s. I will try to illustrate it as best I can, although, of course, many of the images will be from New Hampshire. Quote, "The body of a murdered boy was found in the field of a village near his own. When the police came to investigate, they lined up the village men and made them crouch on all fours 3 days straight, letting them rest only at night. Any man who moved was beaten. Several nights later, 3 police returned to the village and demanded to see a young girl said to have been in love with the murdered boy. They took the girl some distance away, and all 3 raped her. The People's Court was called into special session. When the villagers heard the story, several rose and said they would burn down the police station. The villagers were ready to do it, and Harivallabh himself could hardly contain his anger. But he finally convinced them to take a calmer approach. Several people were sent to the village to get all the facts about the case. Then Harivallabh and the others set the story before a local police official. The official assured them that action would be taken and agreed to meet with the court the next day. But when he arrived at the court, he brought with him a local businessman and state legislator, who joined him in asking that the villagers forget the whole affair. The villagers were not ready to forget it. The story, along with the threat of further action, was sent to the government and to the newspapers, which gave it wide publicity. Following this, the 3 police who had raped the girl were removed from the service." Unquote. Now, just imagine what an almost unheard of accomplishment that would be in America, removing police from service. Imagine if we could do it using these methods. Now, back to Shephard's story. Quote, "Still not satisfied, 1,500 of the villagers staged a 1-day 40-mile march to 2 local government centers. Finally, one of the high-ranking officers involved in the murder investigation was demoted and transferred. Local businessmen and politicians rushed to the state capitol to get the demotion reversed. But the chief minister, equivalent to a state governor, reportedly told him he didn't wish to cut short the life of his administration by letting an adivasi uprising grow to invincible strength." Unquote. So, is there any reason we couldn't do some things like this in New Hampshire? I know we already have some arbitration capability within the movement in the form of Mike Ruff. Some New Hampshire legislators have partially reestablished a process for hearing petitions against government officials. But there's probably no substitute for a lone Gandhi type under a tree. See the video descript for details on the People's Court of India and an American version that has started in San Francisco.
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance at nhliberty.org. Now, if you were to go over to the State House in New Hampshire and say, nhliberty.org, well, lots and lots of nhliberty.org members would hear you because they're all over the place at the State House. You can't swing a fist without hitting one of them. Ow. I hope you'll join them at nhliberty.org. Ow. Or maybe I should say, I hope you'll join us because I am a member. nhliberty.org.